Hello, my name's Ali Lister and I'm the Associate Assistant Principal at Co-op Academy Leeds. I'm in charge of English and literacy and a couple of other things. I want to show you about how marking and feedback can elicit progress in a particular cohort of students. I've chosen some of our multilingual students to focus on, to look at their books, to see how they can cope with the really quite high tariff demands of the English literature GCSE. There are three girls and they have differing levels of progress within learning English. One of them has been in Britain for quite some time, but has significant SEND issues as well in terms of processing and in terms of literacy capability. Another has been in England for, again, a few years, but has missed a lot of primary education. So there's a lot of gap filling, a lot of hinterland knowledge to catch up on there. And one is a fairly recent arrival from Italy. And she has been learning English in Italy, but she's now learning English in an English school. Her literacy and education was very good, so she is poised really to make more rapid progress. So I'll just show you some of the work that they have done over the past year or so. It's from various different stages, various different literature texts. But the whole process through year 10 was we were teaching them literature so that we could focus on embedding the knowledge that they need and building on that knowledge they need once they were in year 11. So first of all, we've got a girl whose literacy is quite weak, the girl that's been in England for quite some time but has SEND needs. And I don't know if you can see here, but this was a starter activity that she took quite a long time to do. And she's made some corrections based on that in her book. But that was all she managed to do in that lesson. Now, one of the things that we obviously are focusing on is productivity. We need students to be able to write more as time goes on. So we do, and I do, we do, you do release model method of teaching, as a lot of schools do. And the girl, she managed to do the we do part of it fairly well. She kept up with that. She made sure that she had that in her book. But when it came to the I do part that we call quality time, she pretty much copied out again what we'd done as the we do. So she didn't have enough confidence in order to be able to develop her own thoughts about the poem that we were reading at that point. A little bit later on, we did a lot more work on the I do, we do part of it. And we have some specific sentence starters that in that first example there, you can see she has underlined the sentence starters and she managed to talk through with me first of all. So we do quite a lot of talk for writing, but she talked through with me what she wanted to say. And then she put it together into a paragraph by herself using the underlined sentence starters again there. And she managed to actually do a full literature paragraph, having talked it through with me. She did have a bit of misunderstanding here, which I'd flagged up, and she talked through what she would say instead, and she began to write it down by the time the lesson finished. So she's made quite a lot of progress in about 6 months in terms of her confidence in being able to write a literature paragraph. We obviously need to build that up over the next few months and make sure that she can write 3 or 4 paragraphs for her to have the chance of actually getting a grade that will see her through to college. So the next girl she's the one who's been in England for quite some time, but lacks a bit of confidence. It's a very similar process. This is a new book. So it's a very similar process. We've done the I do part where she's underlined the main sentence starters there. And she's moved on to do her own paragraph there, which wasn't very long, but she thought it through herself and decided what she wanted to do. She uses a mini whiteboard by the side of her to record some vocabulary and some ideas. So I put the Post-it note in there because I didn't want it to be her final piece of work, because I wanted her to work out what should come next. So she did the first part, but she wasn't confident enough to move on to the second part in that case. And then when she thought about it and she did the task that I set her, it's supposed to be in red pen. She does make an apology just here. But she did do the second part, and it's actually a lot more detailed than the first part. So she's able to analyze language in a way that she wasn't able to initially. And finally, I've got the girl who came from Italy, who was already quite literate and had had a decent education in Italy before she arrived. So one thing that we do in order to support students when they're writing about literature is it's not just the sentence starters that you've seen in the previous two books that the students have underlined, but we actually give them a strip of sentence starters to help them really develop the detail in what they're writing. Now, this girl has this because she is able to think it through a bit more, and that's a way of scaffolding to make sure that she reaches as high a grade as she possibly can. So she's used this in order to write this part here. So, and she has chosen what was her best sentence. I've asked her some questions throughout her writing because she's able to respond to those when she reflects on her work and makes an improvement on it, without me actually scaffolding what that improvement needs to be. The questions are designed to probe a little bit further and make sure that she can reach the next level and make some progress on her own merit rather than being scaffolded up towards it. So she's responded and improved what it was that she was saying in this case. Now, a little bit later on, I took that scaffolding away from her, and they had an assessment piece of work, so they didn't have the scaffolding, and she managed to write quite a bit. I don't know if you can see that very well there. So it starts at the bottom here, and it goes on to this page here. So she managed to write quite a bit without the scaffolding because she had embedded it and she knew the process that she needed to take. So at the end of that, I've done the same again. I've asked her some questions within her essay, within her piece of work, in order to help her move up the levels for literature essays, and move her out of band 3 and into band 4. So I've asked her some questions to make her think things through a bit more. And what she has done in a later piece of work, it's a little bit further on. She's actually responded there. So that paragraph, it's a couple of pages on because we did some interim work. She's responded to those questions in another fairly fully developed paragraph. So there's a couple of things there to take away from that. Using mini whiteboards to allow students to think through their ideas before they commit them to paper. Giving students very specific sentence starters for them to use in their books to be able to develop literature paragraphs. Giving them detailed scaffolding that you then fade away and allow the students to see what they can do with minimal intervention. So these students should now be in a position to take everything further at their different levels. So English as an additional language, multilingual students, it isn't a barrier. The barrier is the vocabulary and the barrier is their confidence. So if we can make sure that we fill them up with the vocabulary they need to be able to write about the literature they study, if we offer them scaffolding and then we gradually fade that scaffolding out, then the confidence builds over time. With some students, it takes a bit longer than others, but that is the process that we go through. While we're marking literature, we do pay attention to literacy, to spellings and to punctuation, capital letters, the use of inverted commas for quotations, and paragraphing. But the paragraphing is almost easier than any of the other things because the scaffolding sentences we give them constitute a paragraph at a time. So we do pay attention to that, but with literature, it's about building up their vocabulary, building up their hinterland knowledge, and giving them the structures with which to record their responses to the texts. So I hope that's been useful for you, and thank you very much for listening.